I looking right now? Am I online? And I sound pretty good? 1, 2, testing 1, 2. I could raise it if it need be. Okay. Thank you. Okay. All right. Enjoy the house. I'll see you. And if I won't hear from you. So have a happy Thanksgiving. All right. Thanks. Doc, are you going away or you stay?
I'm staying, just staycation.
Is that good, bad?
Say that again.
Is that good or bad for you, vacation?
It's good staycation because, I think I need to rest a little bit.
That's what I need to do.
Call to order meeting of Hastings-on-Hudson Board of Education for Monday, November 21st. We're going to open our meeting. Some announcements from Dr. Kersey, is that right?
Well, as they're in the record listed, so I don't tend to list the meetings, so I think we can just move right through. And go to the next item.
So item 2, we're going to start with our student reports. So whoever's ready, willing.
So today was the blood drive.
Mike.
Oh, sure, Mike.
Thank you. Today was the blood drive. With help from Hastings Kids and the Youth Council, sophomore Natalie Romero, along with Charlotte Dorietz-Bourdain and Katie Cho, organized a blood drive through the American Red Cross. In addition to contacting the mayor and other town officials, they spread the word by running a lifesaver table, where they would hand out lifesavers to parents and teachers and students, of course, at various locations, including the school play and at the farmers market. And the drive took place today in the Cochrane Gym, and there were many student volunteers, and it was a huge, huge, huge success. They collected an amazing 41 liters of blood today. Sports are back. Winter track, boys and girls basketball, boys swimming, and wrestling have all started. We're still in the preseason phase, but teams are hard at work preparing for games, matches, and meets, and we're looking forward to a great winter season. And special congrats to sophomore Caitlin Thomas, who placed 26th this weekend in New York State Federal Meet. There were nearly 300 runners. She placed 26th. That's absolutely incredible. The meet was up at Bowden Park in Wilders Fall, New York. The entire girls' cross-country team went to support her, a testament to the supportive culture of Hastings athletics. Congrats to Caitlin and to the entire running program.
Thank you. Yes,
Okay.
Bowden Park, is that really steep one?
That hill is brutal. It's like a mile and a half up and then a mile and a half. With the last 800
tiring to
meters,
walk down that
brutal
hill.
flat. It's tough. And Caitlin, that was like the 4th time she ran it. She's awesome. Now we get to talk about
Sorry,
Project
Joe.
Share. So, for those of you that don't know, Project Share is a 501c3 nonprofit that's been running out of the high school for the past 35 years. So Jeannie Newman, who was an art teacher in the high school, started it as a student club, service club. They started doing midnight runs, and I think 33 years ago, I think that number's right, they decided they wanted to host a Thanksgiving dinner for the homeless right here at school, and I think they worked it out with the staff in the cafeteria and planned this dinner and maybe bussed 100 or so homeless folks from the city up to the high school and served a Thanksgiving dinner. We've done that dinner for the last 30 years, and it's gotten bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Obviously, for the last 2, because of COVID, we've had to do it in a sort of remote format, doing dinners on wheels. But this is going to be our 32nd ever Thanksgiving dinner at Hastings High School. The last one we had, which was my freshman year, there were 800 homeless folks, adults and children, that we bussed into the Cochrane Gym and served this enormous Thanksgiving dinner to. We had last time about 300 student volunteers. It's pretty similar this year. We've spent the last, this is a combination of students and community volunteers. We've spent the last several months fundraising for the dinner, working at the farmers market, reaching out to past students and families and community members. We've had restaurants in Hastings and surrounding communities chip in and agree to cook turkeys. We've done a ton of cooking here in the cafeteria, with thanks so much to Mr. A and the entire high school staff for making that possible. We had, I think, about 200 volunteers here over the weekend, cooking turkeys, making stuffing, mashing potatoes. It's been really special, moving stuff up and down with the elevator, being able to use all the different kitchen tools. So not only is it an awesome way to do some service and help people who need it, it's a fantastic learning experience for all those who are volunteering. It's just an awesome. I learned how to slice onions this weekend, which was tough, but totally worth it. And we have right now in the cafeteria, probably a couple hundred turkey legs and bins and bins and bins of stuffing and mashed potatoes and salads that are going to be served tomorrow night at Thanksgiving dinner. First off, thank you for agreeing agreeing to move the meeting to tonight so that we could have that dinner tomorrow uninterrupted. But we're going to be busing starting about 5 to 5:30 homeless folks from New York City and surrounding areas in Westchester to the high school. We're going to be serving the dinner we're going to have the actual dinner in the Cochran Gym, and in the Green Gym we're going to have like a kid center. So there's going to be stuffed animals and face painting. It's all going to be run by student volunteers and a couple of volunteers from the community. We really hope that all board members can stop by. Dr. McCursey already has his t-shirt. It's going to be a really great night. We're expecting enormous student participation. We're so lucky to have shares as part of our school community. I've been so lucky, Ellie has been so lucky to have gotten to be a part of it for a little bit. And yeah, thank you, board, for being so supportive of the organization. We're super excited for tomorrow night.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you. We're going to move on to the highlight of the evening, academic assessment. I'm sorry? Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. Part 3, public comment. There's no public here at the moment, so we're going to skip to part 4, special report, academic assessment, New York State Board for grades 3 through 8.
So, Melissa, just let me set this up, and then Dr. Szymanski has worked exceptionally hard on what you're about to hear. We've got Amy Kazis as principal. Jen Sprelli is out today for personal reasons. Lou's here as a moral support. Let me just say 2 quick things, which I've put in writing frequently since arriving in Hastings, is that all of us in Hastings believe in multiple measures, and it's very simple. We're all humans, and no one number explains a human. No one day, no one hour, no one week, not even a year explains any of us. So you have to bring that same sense to metrics in education. And unfortunately, a lot of people lose sight of that. They think it's only numbers that can explain what we do in education, and it's just not possible. And if you wonder why, again, think about trying to be a human and explain that with a single number or a single set of numbers. But it is very, very important, having said that, that we look at the data, we look at the metrics, so it's one piece of what we understand. And especially coming out of COVID, nationally, internationally, a lot of concern about learning loss. So at least the last now going on 1.5 years here, unless we had some numbers to look at, we would not have a perspective on where we are relative to that concern about learning loss. And about 4 weeks ago, NAEP came out, and it was a national issue about our schools are in crisis, our schools are failing. Once again, based on solely the numbers, so a mistake. NAEP is the most defensible type of test to look at, but lots of questions is how does NAEP relate to Hastings? Well, what Melissa's going to talk with you about, Dr. Szymanski, it is an apple and an orange. NAEP is an apple, we're talking about oranges, so you can't necessarily draw connections, but once again, having some metrics, some numbers for you as a board to look at will help you understand where we are relative to a state and national context. So simply put, lots of words, but my setup is please join me, as you have already in Hastings long before I arrived, is not feasting on any one number, but use numbers in the whole mix of things that you think about when understanding progress. Melissa?
Great. So I have the pleasure of presenting our academic data, grades 3 through 8, to you. And the purpose of the session is really to tell the Hastings story both recently and over the past 5 years. I'll be including state data, local data, and some relevant context to tell the story. I'll be analyzing and highlighting some key takeaways, and there will be 3 content areas that we'll be moving through: ELA, mathematics, and science. And to support the flow of meaning making this evening, I'll plan to stop after each content area to address any content specific questions that you may have, and then at the conclusion of the presentation, I'll open it up again and invite additional questions. So let's begin with an overarching analysis. Students in grades 3 through 8 are doing well overall on multiple measures. That's a compliment to our faculty and our staff, and we're seeing many areas of strength on both standardized state measures and also local STAR assessment measures. There are some areas of variation, however, and that includes by content and also by grade level performance. So let's begin together with our ELA data. And I'd like to just remind everyone that last year, Summer of 2021, Renaissance STAR diagnostic screening tool was selected by a committee of teachers and administrators, and this is our second year of implementation. It's a relatively new diagnostic tool for us. We're still learning it, and so far it's given us a lot of really good data to work with in terms of supporting instruction and also understanding where students are over time. So this chart shows the results of our reading diagnostic screener. So moving along, you'll see 3 columns from left to right. You'll see the grade level, you'll see fall 2021 data, and fall 2022 data. Also, if you look along the diagonal, you can actually see shifts in the proficiency of cohorts from students moving from 21 to 22. There is a caveat about that, however. So where you see an asterisk, there are some cautions related to cohorts for students, and that's really in grades 1 through 3, and I'll give a little bit more flavor about that soon, but those data points are not really comparable from year to year because of who is in the pool, and I'll speak to that in a moment. So you can see the percentage of students performing at or above benchmark. And you're looking at fall 2021 last year and fall 2022 this year. And again, those are the grade levels. I'll leave that here, and I'll just, I'll continue through the analysis. I want to provide a little bit of context. So as I mentioned, STAR was introduced in fall 2021. And variables that impacted the fall 2021 administration last year included, for grades 1 through 3, the early emergent readers were administered the early literacy screener, and that was upon the recommendation of our lyric partner with whom we worked. And that's because students who are not yet on text, we wanted to make sure that there was an early tool to be able to assess them. Also, there were a small number of students being screened outside the window. So as we were working with the technology around that, there were some areas to navigate that involved rostering and access to the tools. So when you're looking at that data, you have to take into consideration some students were assessed slightly later than others. And as you can see in the chart, just for some overarching takeaways, the large majority of students in grades K through 4 this year performed at or above the benchmark on the STAR Reading Diagnostic Screener. You're seeing slight increases for some cohorts. So again, if you look diagonally from 2021 up to 2022, you're seeing a shift in grades 4 to 5. You are seeing a shift in grade 3 to 4, but again, that's qualified based on who was in the pool. And then stable performance for the grade 2 to 3 cohort, again, just taking into consideration who is in the pool. We're seeing a substantive decrease in performance of the grade 5 to 6 cohort, and some slight decreases noted for some of the other K-8 cohorts. When comparing the cohorts in grades 1 through 3 from year to year, our early emergent readers, 51 students, were not included in the 2021 data. And again, that's because they were given just the early literacy screener that year. All students are included in the 2022 data. So the students that we assessed with the early literacy screener this year, we also assessed with the STAR Reading Diagnostic this year. So they're included twice. And so in fall 2021, out of a total of 341 students across grades 1 through 3, again, 51 students were given the early literacy screener. Teachers know their students, and essentially they had already flagged that some students might be more vulnerable, and those are the students they assessed with the early literacy screener. In this year, fall 2022, we did use the same process. However, it was 32 students, and they were given both assessments. So that's a look at our local data. Our state ELA data is going to be presented in the form of a heat map. And I'll be displaying a larger version of the small heat map that you see here. And what you'll be able to see is longitudinal performance by grade, annual performance across the grades, and you'll also be able to look at longitudinal performance by cohort. So it's organized in the same way that the START data was just presented. So if you look across the row from left to right, you're looking at the performance of a grade over time. If you're looking by column, from bottom to top in ascending grade order, you're looking at annual performance across the grades, different groups of students. And if you're looking vertically from lower left to upper right along the diagonal, you're starting to look at that longitudinal performance by cohort. The darker circles represent stronger performance, and the larger number in each circle reflects our performance decile, the Hastings performance decile, when being compared to the Southern Westchester BOCES region. You can see all the schools on the left in that column there. And the smaller number in each circle reflects the percentage of students who scored at or above proficiency for Hastings only. So again, the bigger number in the circle is relative to the region. The smaller number in the circle is what percentage of our students met or exceeded the proficiency standard. And lower numbers, when you're looking at the decile, are stronger. So for example, if you're looking at 2022, grade 4, it's showing first decile. So comparable to the region, we performed in the top 10%. So you want that lower number, that's stronger. So in 2022, just looking overall, between 64.6% and 90.1% of students met or exceeded the proficiency standard depending on the grade level. So that's relative to ourselves, how many students met or exceeded proficiency. We're seeing fairly stable performance of student cohorts from 21 to 22 relative to the region. You're seeing an increase in cohort performance of students moving from grades 3 to 4. And you're also seeing an increase in cohort performance of students who move from grades 7 to 8. We're seeing decreases in the cohort performance of the other grades. When we're looking at students scoring at or above proficiency, from 21 to 22, we're seeing that increase from grade 5 to grade 6. And then we're looking, if you look at the bottom two rows, grades 3 and grades 4, we're seeing stronger performance over time from 2017 to 2022 for students at Hillside at the elementary school relative to the region. So if you're looking at the decile comparative, you're seeing stronger performance grades 3 and 4. And then overall, we're seeing variations within grades over time and also across buildings. The big blank column that you see there is because the assessment was not administered because of COVID. So let's pause there. Any questions related to ELA?
Can you just remind me again, sorry, it's so much information, what the little number means and what the big number means?
Sure, yes. So the big number is how we're performing relative to the region. And the region is inclusive of all the schools on the left that I included on the slide.
And is that on a 5-point scale?
It's on a 10-point scale. Yep. And it's our decile ranking.
Okay.
So if you see, for example, a 2, it means we performed in the top 20%.
Understood. Okay, great, thanks. And then the little number?
The little number is the percentage of students in that grade level, in that circle, who met or exceeded proficiency.
And what percentage does that have to be?
So it
When you
doesn't.
take the test, like I know you can be like at 89%.
Yeah, it's a great question. So they level it by levels 1 through 4. And if a 3 is the proficiency standard, 4 is exceeding proficiency. Each year, just to get a little bit more specific, the state changes what exactly proficiency mean. It's based on the scale score, and every year they shift it. So we pay attention to that. But it's whatever they do for the scale score is for everyone in the whole state. So it would be comparable in terms of what proficiency is.
Got it. And I think you told us this already when we decided to use the STAR. But tell me the difference again in the questions and the format between the state test and the STAR test.
Sure.
Are they measuring the same things in some cases, or?
It's a great question. So I'll work backwards. So are they measuring the same thing? Yes, in the sense of they're looking at what the performance expectations are for our learners. So what are we expecting a learning outcome to be for a third grader? Or what are we expecting a learning outcome to be for a fourth grader based on the standards? The challenge is with the STAR, it's an adaptive test and it's norm reference to that particular point in the school year. So what you're seeing in terms of the local data is like performance based on proficiency based on a moment in time. It is nationally normed. The state test is state normed, so it's a little bit different in terms of the pool. STAR is, now you asked about the structure of the test. So STAR is adaptive. So it is taken online and it adapts to where a learner is. It will continually adjust. And then at the end, it will essentially benchmark where a student is. Are they, exceeding the benchmark? Are they at the benchmark? Are they at risk? And they'll put it on a scale essentially. Where the state test, it takes a similar approach in the sense that 3 is meeting the proficiency standard, 4 is exceeding the proficiency standard. Depending on where a student is at a 2, you can be a high 2, you could be cuspy to proficient, or less cuspy to proficient, right? In terms of more of a lens on potential intervention support. But it is both are looking at a developmental fill in the blank grader. The difference is with STAR, it's at a moment in time, and with the state assessment, it's cumulative over the course of the year. And so the idea is that, you want to, the state test is really designed to measure our program, like to what extent are we aligned with performance expectations. You look at the standards. So at the next generation ELA, next gen math, P12 science learning standards will ultimately be the new science assessment, which I'll speak to when we get there. But it is meant to measure our program. In addition, it is looking at individual students where they are to see if anyone's in need of intervention based on what New York State expectations are.
Got it. So when I look, for instance, at it's page 4 in our book. I don't know what page it is on yours because you have a couple of different sides. It's the yellow and black chart. That one, yeah. So if I'm reading it correctly and if I understand it correctly, it seems as though, to some extent greater than others, our entire middle school dropped. Because the 5th, if I'm reading this correctly, because you read diagonally, right? So last year, our 5th grade tested at 84% proficiency, or however you would read it. And then this year, now they're in 6th grade, and they did it at 74%. So it's less. And the same thing for grade 6 was 81%, now it's 80%. And our 7th grade last year was 80%, they're now 8th graders, and it's 74%.
Right.
So that seems surprising given that they've been in school now. You would understand if they weren't doing well because we had remote learning, but last year they were in school the whole time. Is there data or understanding on why the entire middle school dropped?
So a couple of things. I think in most cases, when we're talking about declines or we're talking about gains, we're talking about big D declines versus little d declines and big G gains versus little g gains. So I think it's important to contextualize that. Also, because we were learning the assessment, fall 2021, that assessment happened slightly later, if I'm remembering correctly. So if we're still in the fall window, but students were being assessed a little bit later, it wouldn't be surprising to me that we're showing a little bit higher proficiency because students have been learning in the classroom. But I would need to check that. I think overall, the thing that I flagged, the substantive decline, to have a closer eye on is the cohort moving from 5th to 6th. That one is the one that I flagged. The other ones, So even in terms of a gain, grade 4 moving from 87 to 88 from 2021 to 20, I wouldn't flag that as a substantive increase, for example,
Right.
nor would I flag, grade 6 to grade 7, 81 to 80 as a substantive decrease. So I think, it's hard to say. I think your question about content is really relevant in terms of the bank of questions. It is an adaptive test. But I think what I'm seeing overall is fairly stable with ELA. I do have my eye on that 5th to 6th, and that's something that's really, really important. And I do see, again, that 4th to 5th, a slight increase. I wouldn't suggest that that's substantive.
And the 7th to 8th, it's not enough of a decrease?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely worth a look, which is why, ELA is in our inquiry cycle, this year. It's due, in terms of middle school. We haven't started that yet. We've been in the other inquiries. We've been rolling them in. So we've started the world languages and the hillside mathematics, and it's coming. But it is worth a look. Yeah, and it's a piece of the puzzle for sure.
So when you look at this and you see the results from this and the results from the state test, do the numbers then for the state test make sense given what they're here? That's why I was asking about the similarities. Like, did you get the state results and you're like, yeah, that makes sense given the STAR results, or vice versa?
Yes. Yep.
Was it consistent?
What's that?
Was it consistent?
It's fairly consistent. I mean, to the point that was just raised, if you look at 7 to 8 here, 80 to 74, and you go to the state data and you look at 7 to 8 here, I'm just flagging one grade, right? I mean, you're actually seeing an increase relative to the region, right? Like, so we're showing an increase in our decile ranking comparative to our other cohort, and we're showing a slight increase in proficiency. So it's imperfect, but it paints a general picture.
This I get is the state, and the other one is the
Right.
country. So
Right.
yeah.
But there's nothing in here that is like really wildly surprising. And again, I think it's important to consider STAR data is 3 points across a year. So it's the trend that's really important to continually keep an eye on too.
Right.
My question is kind of like on the verge of what Maureen was asking. And as I'm looking at this, just recognizing that it's a trend over this group in 5 years, what kind of sticks out to me is that if you look at the 4th grade 4, everybody starts in grade 4 at a higher number, 2, than by the time they graduate 8th grade. So the 2017 grade 4 was at a 2, but by the time they graduated in 8th grade, they were at a 3. And that's true for each of the 4th grades. And none of them stayed at a 2 or got better to a 1. And that, to me, kind of understanding that these are snapshots, because it is a trend that holds true over the course of those 5 years. That is something that gives me pause. And I understand certainly that it's something that we're going to be delving into deeply, but and that's not casting aspersions upon anybody. It's just something that the data is kind of bearing out.
Right.
And so I want to understand, particularly since it does show for that one particular cohort that it shows itself most evidently in that first year of transition from 5th to 6th grade when they're departmentalized, and then as they're departmentalized, the scores as they progress through the middle school get lower. That's kind of, for me, that's even more evident, over the past couple of years, which again, coming out of COVID, is understandable. But like, I'm not a data person, but even I look at a semester. So it's just something that, our kids, I'm glad to see that they're strong performers despite the percentiles, but it's just something that, we don't want to just say, well, we're just traditionally a high performance school. We definitely want to make sure that we're having the appropriate support and, that we're keeping the finger on the pulse of like what our students need.
Agreed.
Wanted to point that out.
Yeah, agreed.
Not
Yeah.
observe the question.
Yeah, and I think it's important, I was talking, we were in committee work earlier today talking about something else, and I think it's still relevant. Like, I think it's really important to approach it through the appreciative inquiry lens, and yet still say, and how do we even grow from here, right? So if we follow that grade 4 cohort up and to the right diagonally. Grade 4, 2017, second decile, 71.6% proficient. We see the drop, 66.3% proficient, though we see stability comparable to the region. Then we see actually an increase in proficiency, but not relative to the region, right? So that suggests that, you know, you're taking into account how fast people around us are growing, right, for that one. Then there was no tests, and then an increase again relative to the region, and then thinking about 85% proficiency. If you scoot all the way back to 2017 grade 4, you're actually seeing an increase in proficiency from that cohort. But again, we don't exist in a bubble. So relative to the region, and also being able to continue to move forward, and always asking, and how do we make it better, right? Just saying we're seeing some interesting things, and how do we make it better?
Yeah, I had one technical question, which is in terms of the list over there. Has it been? Is the arrangement based on what is it based on? Is it? I don't see it in alphabetical order. Is it a specific ranking, or it's just?
No, and actually, you know, and it's important to, you know, in terms of like the schools that are on the left-hand column, they all have very different profiles as school districts, right? They all have very different profiles, number of schools, demographic data, all sorts of different things. The reason that those were pulled is purely because we have access to certain repositories to take our data from. This one's from a group called School Meter. It's excellent. They are really excellent in terms of their platform, their insights, what they keep track of. But there was no rhyme or reason. It was presented in the order that they presented it in,
Okay,
rather than
so-
alphabetized. Or
Because I'm wondering, is it some kind of ranking that is happening?
Yeah.
Because it's not in alphabetical order. Maybe my OCD is disturbing me
Nope,
right now.
nope.
Okay, so there's
Fair question.
there's
Yeah,
nothing
there
to
wasn't
that.
a rhyme or reason in
Okay.
my designing it that way.
Okay,
Yeah.
so my question will be for later, but I really would love for that to get answered, which is that yes, we can understand these values, we can make some speculations about it. It's quantitative in nature. I'm not sure whether they did a qualitative one as well. I know we've been doing that in another form like the SEL and the rest. But I know that last year when this presentation was done, the question was, what are we doing to remedy it? And there were certain measures that were proposed, right? What I'm interested in is how do those interventions, how do those implementation go? How did it happen? What are some of the increases or remedies that we saw happening that was reflected in bringing about some form of improvement and progress?
Yep.
With the academic aspect of the kids achieving this academic goal that they've set themselves to pursue, and then in looking at what was done and what must be planned moving forward, how do you sort of gauge and parallel it together to see the collective solution? And again, this is a process. I'm sure that it's not going to be something that we can fully grasp at once, but at least when there's this intervention and you saw this improvement, then you know that, okay, this is an adjustment that should be implemented for this particular process. And then this intervention really did not help, so this is the new idea that we are trying to sort of pilot and see. So I really want to know those practical steps that is being thought of, even if it's not being flashed out. So I'm sure that will be later.
Yeah, so I mean, it's an excellent cross-cutting question, and maybe keep, if there are particular slide questions, but could come back to that, because we're applying the math side as well. So that could be sort of a good wrap-up set of,
Okay.
that's a good cross-cutting question.
Okay. So moving into mathematics. So this chart shows the result of our mathematics diagnostic screener. And again, as with the reading data, you're seeing the percentage of students that were at or above the benchmark, performing at or above the benchmark for each grade and across the 2 years. Same caveat, cautions related to the cohorts, first and second grade, because they're not comparable from year to year. Some of the students in that grade were given the early literacy screener, which also includes mathematics. And so that's why you don't see kindergarten on there. It embeds it. Our littlest learners are still, they're figuring out math, they're figuring out print. So the assessment is very different, which is why you're not seeing a discrete mathematics for the kindergartners.
Let me just jump in here with this NAEP comparison. Again, it's an apple and orange. But on NAEP for the 4th grade, remember there was tons of press, right? 37% of 4th graders in 22 were at the proficient level, 37%. And that's a representative sample of districts and states from across the country. So how you compare the two is a tricky one. In 2019, it was at 39%. So again, it's not exactly comparable, but I just want you to get a sense that the uproar nationally, and it was an uproar, was tied to 37%, 39% as you think about 4th grade. 8th grade was at 27% proficient and 34% proficient in 2019. So I just want to keep we don't have to talk about NAEP, but I just want to kind of tie that national consternation to what you're seeing here. So, sorry, keep going.
Sure. Same variables that impacted the fall 2021 administration in grades 1 and 2 as with ELA. Early emergent readers were administered the early literacy screener, which included the mathematics, and then there were a small number of students being screened outside the screening window. And, overarching takeaways, so the large majority of students in grades 1 through 4 performed at or above the benchmark on the STAR diagnostic screener. We're seeing slight increases noted for some cohorts, so 2 to 3, 4 to 5, 6 to 7. Slight decreases noted for the other grades 1 through 8 cohorts, and fairly stable performance with a large increase in grade 8 performance. Look at grade 8 from 2021 to 2022 horizontally. That's a very big increase. And yes, there is a cohort effect that we need to take into account too, but programmatically that's important to note. And now we can look at the state data.
Before we move on to the state data, I just have a question. So interestingly, again, the 5th to the 6th grade had the drop-off.
Yes.
I was wondering, since we did it in the fall, the winter, and the spring,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you looked at that, like if it went from 83 to like 81 to 79 to 75 to 73, did you see like a decrease through the year, or was it like consistent through the year and then there was a drop this year?
Yeah. So that's a great question. So 2021 at those 3 data points.
Yeah.
I'm doing this from memory. 5th grade did show decline over the course of the year. The other grades, and I remember this because I said we have to be careful not to attribute it to the new mathematics resource, although it was put in 6, 7, 8, right? We actually saw steady increase, right? And in one case, I think we saw a dip and then a spike. Spike's a strong word, but we saw a decrease and then an increase. I'd have to pull it up, and I can do that if there's interest. But there, yes, we did see that what has
For
been
both
part.
ELA and for math, you saw this like gradual decline over time.
I have to look for ELA. I'm not remembering. I am definitely remembering for math because it was an area of focus, and it's been part of our conversations with the 5th grade team. They're actually exploring resources now with the intent to pilot, and so it's on the radar. And I think when I see things like that, I always want to be really careful. And I've said this to our faculty too. I do not see this as a teacher issue. I see this as a program coherence question, right? That if we're seeing variation and we're seeing ups and downs and inconsistencies and we see cohorts go up and down, usually that has to do with coherence. Like what's the journey of a student moving through the system? So that's a big part of the conversations that we're having as we're doing the curriculum review cycle, the inquiry work that we're doing. And in some cases, even when we did the health work over the summer, I'm just pulling a conversation that we had from health over the summer, and when they started actually working on, sticky charts all around the room, we were able to identify that certain things were either omitted or replicated in different grade levels, and we were able to look at that because that's important. And that's health, that's not mathematics, but just an idea of how those conversations are happening when we're engaging in the curriculum review work. But it is usually, it's never one thing, but it's almost never a teacher thing. We have wonderful teachers here, and usually it's a coherence, it's a collective, is there variation between rooms, like how cohesive are we? Like, so programmatically, like we look at the system, we look at all the different components, but it's definitely something to swing back to your earlier question. We have seen that decline in fifth.
Yeah, I wanted to save this for later, but it connects to what you just said. So Dr. Makesi he had mentioned that this is really an aspect that we are looking at. There's a holistic aspect. So what I wanted to share with my colleagues was that when you were talking about us looking at it diagonally, it's the same, at least, students. The same brains are in their skulls, right? So it's not because it's a student defect of not having the ability to learn. There is that holistic approach. Right. And at some point, I know we are going to do SEL, and I keep saying that this is not just unique to Hastings. Academia programming for middle school has to change. We are using the same tactics for elementary school and for high school for middle schoolers. It's not going to work. It's not. The programming, and I'm glad you said programming, because of biology. I'm sorry, that's what I know. I'm a biologist, that's what I know. You cannot assume that that puberty age with that strategy that was used in the elementary school and the maturity that high schoolers are having is going to work the same way. It's a programming thing, and you are right, it's not teachers. It's not teachers. These teachers put in high school or elementary school, I'm sure they will excel. So there is an approach to, be it professional development, pedagogical strategies, it's a whole lot. A lot of research is being done, but how is that research shaping the program is a different story. So I'm interested to look at the SEL results in connection to the middle school. And I'm sure that the SEL may, and again, correlation is not causation, but I won't be surprised if the middle school SEL seems to be lower than elementary and high school. I will not be surprised. And educating an individual it's really what is the state of the individual for that individual to learn to begin with. So it's really a huge problem. That's why I'm just sitting here soaking it all in, but I really want to know the solution. I'm so solution oriented. I'm just trying to wait for that. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that in there.
And this local data, just to be clear, it paints a good picture. And how do we make it better? How do we make it stronger, right? It's this continuous improvement journey, right? How do we make it even better? The mathematics, I spoke to this context and these takeaways. The mathematics for the state, here's the similar heat map presented in the same format again. So if you're taking a look at the state data here, overarching takeaways in 2022, between 62.2% and 90.8% of students met or exceeded the proficiency standard depending on the grade level. Again, that's very large variation, right? So you're seeing in some places 62.2%, in other places 90.8%. And again, it usually is an indication of pointing to coherence and looking at a student's journey over time and program. fairly stable performance of student cohorts from 2021 to 2022 relative to the region. So if you're looking at decile ranking, again, except in grade 5. Increase in cohort performance of grades 6 to 7. Increase in cohort performance of grades 7 to 8 relative to, I'm just trying to list 7 to 8, and yeah, relative to the region. Stable cohort performance from grades 3 to 4, and then a decrease in cohort performance of the other grades. Again, big ideas was to introduce 6, 7, 8, so worth mentioning.
Melissa, question, is it, am I reading it correctly that the opposite in terms of the neighboring districts, the proficiency, the opposite is happening here? So our kind of standing, say, taking grade 4 and carrying it through, the overall proficiency for the locality, 59, say if you carry grade 4 through 8, 59 is now 4th decile versus 68, which was a 5th.
Right.
It's the opposite of what
Right.
happened,
So
right?
yes. So if you're looking just beginning point, end point, if we just speak beginning point, end point to what you just described, we're seeing a decrease in the percentage of students meeting or exceeding proficiency for that cohort. But relative to the region, we're growing at a stronger rate, which puts us at a stronger decile. So 4th versus where we were 5th for, in 2017 for grade 4. So exactly. So it's a tough one because we want, I'd love to see 100% in there. You know what? I really would. Like, I'd love to see. I was talking to someone about this recently. I said, I think when it comes to proficiency, I don't like seeing, personally, I don't like seeing a bell-shaped curve. I like everyone on the proficient end of things, and it's, of course, imperfect, but we strive for that. And when we're looking relative to the region, though, it suggests faster rate of growth for whatever reason in terms of the decile performance. And if you're looking, 7 to 8, 6, you're seeing the same thing. So 2021 grade 7, right? 61.4% proficiency. We were in the lowest 40%. Now we're in the top 40%. So you're seeing some movement there. But we need to keep our foot on the gas pedal. And same, 6 to 7. Moving 66.3% proficiency to 74.8. Again, moving from the 5th decile to the 3rd decile relative to the region. So those are trends that I like seeing, and I'm not surprised. We had teams of teachers working very hard together with dedicated focus, and that matters very much. And having the conditions to be able to learn together like that is really important.
Melissa, if I would jump in, the numbers for our neighboring school districts, is that easily accessed
Yes.
by the public?
Mm-hmm.
Through
It's all public.
like the heat map breakdowns from
The heat map wouldn't be easily accessed, but the state data would be. So,
state data? But
yeah.
not when I look at the decile, it looks, in general, there's about 10 schools in our region that are doing better than us on this 1 or 2 English or math tests. And some of the schools you might be able to guess, and the ones that are not doing better than us, some of them you could guess. I guess there's about 30 schools in this grouping when we look at the decile. But it's not easy to just grab the Eastchester, Tuckahoe, Dobbs, Irvington, Ardsley heat maps to see how their middle schools are doing. I assume, you could be 1% better in 4, it could be a small number that you're ahead of somebody and it's still going to rank you. So I know there's
Exactly.
a lot to not dig into in these numbers.
I know. It's a great point.
Easy to grab heat maps for the other 6 comparable school districts.
What I can grab fairly easily, and it's not a public grab, it's a me grab. I could grab it. Is like basically an ordered ranking of the schools, and be able to see quickly with a look with up and down arrows and percentage changes, who moved up, who moved down, where they are in that list, like an ordered list, in other words. I have access to that through a database that I subscribe to, but the public has access to not in that format. They have access to it in, the New York State, the data repository. But I'd be able to, if that's something of interest, I'd be able to grab it.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. So this I just spoke to. I wanted to pause for any questions related to mathematics before we move on to science. I know we sort of embedded those along the way. So, okay, great. So science, we've got the grade 4 assessment results, percentage of students meeting and exceeding proficiency, and there it is. I think the thing to mention is that this is not dissimilar to many places regionally, and the test is about to shift pretty dramatically, including which grade it's offered at. It will be offered in 5th grade next year, and it will be based on the P12 science learning standards, which are very, very different standards, very different. They're phenomena-based, they're performance-based, there will be investigations that students do. Again, it's a different grade level that will be taking that assessment. And, so that'll be interesting to see because it'll be so markedly different, regionally what happens there. We've been doing a lot of work in the area of science and our alignment work over the last few years. So I'm very optimistic. I'm excited. I know that we've, at Hillside, they've performance assessment tasks that have been redesigned, a lot of great work, and we've been providing differentiated professional learning to the different grade levels based on where they are programmatically and what they've asked for in terms of their needs. And we have someone that we've been working closely with who's really phenomenal. So we'll see. We'll see. Any questions related to grade 4 science? And I don't mean to minimize 100% proficiency by saying not dissimilar to strong performance in the region. I mean, that's really fantastic. You can't do better than that. So. And then finally, Earth Science Regents Assessments results. Percentage meeting and exceeding proficiency. You can see the different dates. As you can see in 2020, it wasn't offered. And this is over the past 5 years, and in 2021, it's very important to note that the Earth Science Regents test was optional. So last year, it was completely optional, and we had a very large number of exemptions. So 78 out of 131 students were tested. That's a very small sample for that 87.2% meeting or exceeding proficiency. In 2022, Earth Science Regents testing was required. There was no exemption at all. And the other thing to note is there was a decline, and I had the opportunity to meet with Jennifer Spirelli, Melissa Shandroff, Jeanette Coker. We talked about, what do we think about that and why do we think that happened? And we do think that based on the sample of who took the assessment, that's number one. But number two, we had a lot of shifts in staffing for Earth Science. There was a lot of shifting going on in 2022. And again, back to that issue of coherence, that became a really big question that we left with.
So you said there was a decrease.
Yes. Yep.
And in order to get the high school credit, is the minimum meet? You have to
Right. Meet or exceed.
exceed. Okay.
So just a quick question, does meeting proficiency mean passing the Regents test?
Yes.
Okay, which is pass grade in the Regents, 65%.
Right. Meeting
Just-
proficiency standard. Right.
Question related to the passing. Is this the one that there was sort of an exception and lowered the passing grade? Is this that exam? Remember there was like sort of an exception to the passing grade? If it was like within a range, there was a process that you could.
I think that was for credit. It was different. So what you're seeing is actual, like the actual data. So what percentage of students met or exceeded proficiency. Go ahead, Alex.
Sorry, just to Maureen's point, what they made, the Regents set up was if you 50 and 64, so a failing grade on the regents. But if you scored in that cohort, you could sort of petition, so to speak, and you passed the class, you could petition for some sort of redress. So that's a different group.
Right.
So would they be in, so the 50 to 64 range, would they be in the proficiency category or not?
They would not. But that's, to Alex's point, there was some allowance in terms of course pass, to be able to receive credit for the course. So there was a little flexibility during pandemic years around that in terms of students being able to petition and taking a look at whether or not they could receive course credit. There was a lot of discretion given locally because of the pandemic. But what you're seeing there is actual meets or exceeds on the assessment. Yep.
So it actually makes sense to me because we have 40% not taking it, right? We had, so roughly 40% did not take it out of the 131. And so it makes sense that if they are all being asked to take it, it's that 40% would certainly impact the overall. So that, I think that I know you mentioned all these other variables, but I feel that 40%, because if you do not need to, you think you don't need F science, and you're not going to study for it. And then the next year you are being asked to take it and it's mandatory. Of course, you've lost it. Learning science is chronological.
Right.
You cannot just jump into it at a later
Right.
time. So if you've missed out on learning the foundational piece, then it totally makes sense. I think that's what it is.
Different cohort, different year, but everyone being tested versus an opt-in is a
Yeah.
very different data
It's
set.
a very
Yeah.
different data set, for sure.
Okay. Any additional questions or discussion?
Is it possible, I'm just wondering, if you look at like the SATs, to compare it, so like if we go back to what the 8th grade might have had, like these guys, with whatever their reports were when they took the SATs, when they took the test, the state test, and then look at SAT results,
Yeah.
is there any way to see, or the SAT is just like such a
It's just
completely different
it's
test.
so different. I know
Yeah.
where you're going with it. It's so different. Our high school data has been historically so strong, in terms of student performance. It is apples to oranges, though.
Yeah, okay.
Melissa, thank you for all that data, and for the principals and administrators. Thank you for keeping the focus on the whole learner, the whole curriculum, and presenting the data in a way that we could grab at it or pass on it, at the same time using it to evaluate, our schools and our students. But thank you for that mix, the way you gave us the depth. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Listen, can I ask we're in the overarching phase here? Just want to ask about a specific thing. I find it interesting that, like, something that we don't test for, but yet we manage and we track is like early literacy. Like those teachers holistically recognize which students are struggling. They're not dependent upon any sort of one variable. It's just a judgment call. And that's interesting. And that sort of holistic approach also, it sounds like it's part of the curriculum review cycle as well. That you guys are breaking this down. You're looking at what's really going on, not an abstraction of what's really going on.
Right.
So one thing I'm curious about, when we talk about math scores or science scores, and we can debate the statistical significance of the changes, but do we track, even in a soft way, the number of students who, as math and science get harder, let's say 7th and 8th, that go on in high school to advanced math or science courses? Is it whittling down a lot? Is it self-selecting a lot? Are we having imbalances? Because I think that, apart from all the data, knowing that we're sort of, whatever we're doing in middle school is delivering a varied and substantial cohort of students who are engaged to dig in high school. So is there any sense, or do we have any sense of what that's like?
Yes. It's a really great insight. It's a great question. And I think when we're looking at enrollment in electives, that's one way that we can take a peek at that, right? We can say, who is accessing the electives? Like if you're looking at an advanced calculus class, or if you're looking at pick anything, right? Any of those advanced electives, I think that's one way. And of course, the confound is always, you know, scheduling, things being offered at the same time, right? So that it's not perfect either. But I do think that we can get a sense of that based on different elements of performance. You know, over time, we look at the numbers that go into eSchool in terms of report cards. Tomorrow, I'm going with a group to a tri-state group on grading for equity. Like, how are we giving students the opportunity to fail forward, so to speak, where we're prioritizing learning and an opportunity to try again, and that becomes part of what we believe in and value in terms of what achievement looks like, right? Acknowledging that it's about the learning and not just about the number, and then what does that look like as a child is moving into certain things, certain electives. So it's looked at in a softer way. So these softer things are looked at in softer ways, and I think it's a really, really, really good thing to keep an eye on. And what we want to be doing is removing barriers. I know Lou is here. I want to provide voice, and Amy, I was going to invite you also if you had anything.
Are you asking if we have opportunities for students who may be struggling in mathematics in middle school to sort of re-engage when it comes to the high school? Is that what you're asking?
A little bit, but more just, I just want to make sure that, we track the data. I just want to make sure that we're, sort of what you're talking about, that we're tracking that kids are coming into the high school and sticking with or reaching for or aspiring towards these sort of more challenging classes.
Absolutely, that's the concept of our open enrollment in high school, right? So we kind of push our kids, and sometimes some of us push them a little bit too much, and it could be counterproductive. But we encourage our students. I mean, you got two students right here who may not enjoy a certain topic, I'm going to use that word, but they want to push themselves in that area because it's something that they interest them. So absolutely, plenty of opportunities. But I also want to go back to, we stopped ranking at the high school for a reason, because that didn't define who the child was based on their ranking. So I would caution the board, don't look at those scores as indicators of the whole child. Who is coming up in 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade? Because when they get to the high school, they're great kids, and they work very, 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 very hard. But Project Share, the kids that are not seeing something, their affinity to social justice, things like that. You need to have math and English skills, I get that. But there's a whole child piece that I don't want us to all get caught up in,
Right.
Which makes our community a lot more special than other communities.
Right.
So yes,
Thank you.
great question. We watch our kids. In
Yeah.
fact, middle school and high school, every 5 weeks we do a data dump to look at how kids are really doing.
Oh, that's excellent. Excellent to know. Thank you.
And to Jeremy's earlier point, the next presentation I have the pleasure of making is around Portrait of a Hastings Learner, which will also factor into how we view progress over time and thinking about our learners and what we believe in and value. And I think, the assessments, the state standards, they're meant to be the floor and not the ceiling. And to that idea of the whole child and a more innovative approach and looking at people and competencies, it's not an either or. Everything all fits together in a puzzle. Amy, I just wanted to offer you, don't feel like you have to, but I know you're here, so I wanted to, if there's anything you wanted to add to anything that I mentioned tonight. Yes, there's a mic there. Yeah.
I just wanted to comment on the numbers that you saw. The Emerald the numbers are not the entire story. As Melissa shared, the data from Hillside in 2021 left out 51 of our striving learners, whereas in 2022 we were able to include all students. That was really important, but we didn't know how to do that in 2021 because the program was new for us. So it's important as we look at the numbers to understand that it really isn't an exact look from one year to the next. The other piece, much like Lou said, is that the reason that we use STAR data is so that we can help our students track where they are and be
want to.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Lou.
I want to come back to my question, which builds on what Amy said. So yeah, I like to always, my colleagues know that I like to look at the other side of the coin, and I don't like to use the word devil's advocate, but I think it's a common term. So I want to throw in that other voice. So I know that, I agree 100%. It's a holistic approach. I've already stated that. So being that we are looking at, it's a pie, and we are looking at a slice of it. Now, that slice of that pie that has some unpleasant aspects to it, what are we doing? So I know that we've done this before last year. We had some plans in place. How are those plans going? I remember, again, before I joined the board, I talked about how Amy got the ELA, the community members. I was a community member at the time. It got assessed. We all were, as much as I was a community member, I was all over looking at things myself. So I'm just wondering, what has worked? Okay, this is what is here. What is next? And if you can speak a little bit to it, I know it's not about the numbers, but the numbers are part of the big pie.
Sure.
So you may not need to say everything, but some parts
No,
of it.
I'm happy to.
Okay.
So I'm actually, I want to say thank you again to the Professional Learning Committee, and then subsequently the administrators and the department chairpersons for looking at creating, designing, moving forward the curriculum review cycle. I think that's really critical. That's a very big deal that we have that, and I think it prioritizes content areas of focus over time. So that's one big thing that we're doing. We're being really clear about our timeline, how we're looking at things, when we're looking at things, our priority areas of focus. I have had the pleasure already to be rolling into work in different phases of different cycles with groups of teachers. So, big ideas 6 through 8, mathematics, they chose as implementation phase a resource and the work that went on with that. More so than ever before, we've been doing work as a collective of educators. That is really, really important. And actually, for those who like research, John Hattie, he does a lot around effect size and collective efficacy work. It's like this idea of the power of the group to move the group. And we have really brilliant educators who need time together in a room to dream, create, design. It's really important. And in many cases, and there are various forms of professional learning, and that is one of them, teacher expertise, right? Being able to share strong practices with each other and help amplify bright spots that live in our system, and there are many. So that's another area. The fact that we have diagnostic screeners, that's new for our district as of last year. So that has gone overall quite well to be able to bring that in. And to Amy's point, it's not just use as summative data that we give it and then we put it on the screen and we share it out. We say, okay, what are the moves instructionally for these students? And are we seeing that anyone of our striving learners needs to be scooped up for a little bit of additional support, and being clear on our processes for doing that? And that's the MTSS process, multi-tiered system of support, measuring and tracking interventions over time. We've had the opportunity to enhance direct supplemental instruction, and that came out of the grant monies, right? To be able to say, let's give a boost here, and being able to provide some more of that intervention support. So that's another thing that's happened. And then engaging in the inquiry cycle, I would say, is the number one thing right now that is really helping in terms of looking at where we are, not only our beliefs and our values, but thinking about where we want to be, what we're seeing in the student work, what we're seeing in the data points. Again, the process with a group of teachers in a room together isn't the same as sitting here in presentation format, but being able to actually delve into work and actually looking at what students are creating, taking a look at our resources, taking a look at, and Amy, I might invite you to talk a little bit about Hillside Math in just a moment, because we're in that phase 1 inquiry right now. Mathematics, pick any content area, but being able to work together and really understand research-based practices, and then taking a look at to what extent are we aligned to this, like not only our belief system, but the resources that we're working with, and also thinking about any shifts that we may need to make. Coming out of the portrait process, we're going to have a whole other set of considerations, which is going to be really important as well. So those are all very concrete things that are happening. And it's happening in a tiered approach in terms of content over time. There is no system that can take on every single content well simultaneously, especially not when someone's in grade K through 5, you're teaching all content areas. That would be not sound to make so many changes all at once. But if we can say, here's our priority area of focus, here's why, and do our best to be consistent with that, unless there's a reason that warrants a shift, that we've got now a system in place to be able to engage in the inquiry work. Do you have you want to speak a little bit to Hillside Math and what we've been working on with the team? Or I could talk about it if you want, but yeah, okay. This is not rehearsed or anything. So.
I like that. I like spontaneous.
We keep it real all the time. So.
Our Hillside Math Committee has been meeting as we are reviewing our math curriculum. We've been looking at mindset practices and making determinations about what's important to us as math learners and as math teachers. The committee is following the process that we've outlined multiple times. We use it for our social emotional learning, we use it for ELA, and now again for math. We're going to be looking at a number of different programs, reviewing programs, considering the things that are most important to us, and then seeing which program is the best match for that. But ultimately, the goal is that our committee will be able to find a decision, and then the planning and programming the classrooms all together. The idea that cohesion is essential. The teachers really like the fact that your recap has been a cohesive program, that everyone has been doing. So as a result, children move from year to year. They have the language, they have the structure, and that's been really helpful. So the goal is that when we look at the math program, that coherence will still be there.
Mm-hmm. Right, and the group is actually making decisions based on, we've done a lot of work together around not only our beliefs and values, but what does the neurobiological research show about like visual mathematics, thinking about mindset practices, as Amy mentioned. And, we may decide to take what works and elevate it further, or we may decide that there might be something even stronger out there, but we are in an authentic inquiry process. So that's one example. And it's been really, I can say it's been a bright spot for me, certainly professionally, because it's fun. I mean, as adults, we're engaging in math. We're looking at student work. We're taking a look at the standards. We're looking at, I think the emphasis for teachers over many years has been on content, and we're getting into mathematical practices, persevering, making sense of problems, just getting into constructing viable arguments, critiquing the reasoning of others. Like, those are really good life skills, and they're good math skills, and they're transferable across content areas. So, and they're also in the math standards, right? And usually, in most places I've been over time, people don't tend to elevate them as much, but now when we're looking at our world and what's necessary, we need really strong thinkers, right? And mathematical thinkers, and looking at the visual math. So we're playing, we're getting involved in that. And all of that is in service to helping learners, and you mentioned like that chunk of the pie of how do we then move towards continuous improvement there. So
I don't know whether, I have one last question, maybe Amy could help with that. So I know, can you give a practical, if you can, when you chose to get the ELA assessed and bring in sorry, can you hear me? Sorry. So I know that years back you got the ELA to be looked at closely and made some adjustment to it. Are you able to share, if possible, what did you see, what necessitated that move? And obviously there has been improvement, and I know there's always continuous improvement, so that is not like the end stop for it. Are you able to share what necessitated that review process that you had, and then how I love some little bit of practicality to things, that's why I'm asking this, and what necessitated you to do that, and how did that shape the practice that somewhat you are?
So are you asking specifically about ELA?
Yes, correct.
So when I first arrived at Hillside, that came from teachers. When I did
Great.
my interviews and asked, well, what are the areas of strength where we're doing really well, and then what are the areas that you see as opportunities for growth, the teachers recognized that back then ELA, there wasn't a cohesive curriculum. So that came straight from our
From the
staff.
teachers,
And
perfect.
then once we recognized that, we brought in consultant, Gravity Global Consulting, to be able to come in and do a needs assessment for us. And she met with each grade level, and she was able to tell us, okay, here are the things that grades are doing really well, and here are the areas that, there's lack of cohesion. And then from there, that began our process where we had a committee, much like you do for now, and together our committee made decisions. Was the decision to buy a program. At the time, the school had rolled off of the New York State modules, and having a scripted program didn't feel right for our teachers. So that was the reason the teachers felt that it would be best to be able to work with a consulting team and actually write out our own curriculum. So we're using professionals who are creating curriculum directly for Hastings students, and that's why we've seen such a success. Because we are the ones that are actually making the professional decisions. So when we see a child in front of us, we're not relying on a book.
Correct.
It tells us what to do for that child because that book doesn't know that child.
Correct.
Instead, it's the teacher who is highly skilled to be able to make those professional decisions. In the same way, when we choose a math resource, it's a resource, and that will help guide us, but it's our teachers, and that's the reason investing in our teachers is so critical.
Yes.
Perfect.
Professional learning is so critical because the teachers are the reason that we're doing as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep.
Well said. Thank you so much. Can I just ask is it the GYO program, Grow Your Own program? Is it the GYO program, or that's something different?
It's different.
It's different,
It's
right?
not that.
Okay.
ELA is a
Homegrown.
It's our own.
Yeah, it's homegrown.
It's not the GYO. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
I
You
just have one
know
last
what I
question,
mean by
Melissa. Just for the next time, if possible, I'd love to see a breakdown of at and above,
Got it.
rather than like grouping them together, because it'd be interesting to see like what percentage is above. I'm just looking at it now, just thinking about the grade 8 ELA, for instance. So 74% are at and above, but really over a quarter of our children are below expectations. It's a lot to think about that. And so I'm just curious, like how many are just simply at versus exceeding? Do you know what I mean? Like, so just not, I don't need to print now, but when we have the presentation again in the spring, I'd love to see that. Thank you. If it's not too hard.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I want to just say thank you to our faculty who are not present, who are centering children in the work that they do and understand and agree. We're always striving towards better. I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth. The ones who I've worked with directly, that we do great work and we're always striving to make it better. That's why we got into this business, because we're in a learning organization. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just going to wrap and go back to the beginning, and the board meetings are meetings done in public. People listen, and I've had great input today from people. There's a bit of a narrative in Hastings within some of the faculty that, my goodness, the board is digging into data now. Dr. McCursey, Dr. Szymanski are digging into data, and that's all they care about. I've lived in this ed world a long time. 1981 I started, do the math. I plan to live a lot longer in this education world. I've been in a lot of discussions. What I have just heard tonight is very holistic discussion. One about data is one piece of it, not the whole piece. I want to assure the faculty that I'm hearing the board here use this as one piece of evidence, not the piece of evidence. And that's a very healthy place.
Yes.
And I know the board joins me in saying, yes, we have to do very, very well and also look at multiple measures. But if there's any narrative, any corner of this district emerging to say, all they care about is numbers, it's a false narrative. Please.
Thank you, Dr. McCursey, and I would second that. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, moving on, I want to thank Lou and Amy for coming. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Student reps, Gus and Eliana.
Where are you going?
Get some extra sleep before
He has to cook some turkeys.
Apple pies. They were cooking apple pies.
Okay. Thank you. Have a good evening. All right, moving on. As a measure of expediency, we have a report from the superintendent and administrative reports from Dr. Szymanski and from a business official. Those reports have been entered into the public record as part of the agenda, and it's available via board docs, but we're not going to go over those verbally. So we're going to move on to number 7, business items.
Maureen, did you have?
Oh, no, I just put in the comments.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay.
So Maureen said, thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
So, moving on to business items, are there any questions or comments about business items 1 through 12?
Yeah, I just have a question. What does number 7 mean, the salary advancement? What is that?
Sure. So teachers are on, contractually on step and scale when they're hired. They can have the opportunity through in-service credits or graduate credits per what's been collectively bargained to move to what we call the right on it. So those are the salary advancements that you're seeing, where people have banked a certain number of credits and they're ready to make a move.
Understood, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ray. Are there any other questions or comments on business items 1 through 12?
Is there anything we need to know about the budget transfer, or is it pretty standard?
So, yes, this is kind of as we go through the year and some of our projections are either, or expenses are exceeding projections, we make some budget adjustments as we go. And, as you can see, there's, especially the first few on the list, are related to energy costs that exceeded budget projections, and some other, items are just related to staffing or shifts in student support. So where maybe initially the thinking was a student would be out of district, and now either they need an aid because they're in district. So as the year goes on within, the budget where we need to maybe shift in one area to cover another, we make these at different board meetings throughout the year. And then, and again, just the fuel costs and things such as that on some of our bus runs are exceeding our initial projection, but most of them are fairly standard here across the codes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just wanted to pull out item number 6
Sure.
for some clarification, because I saw there was some bad information out in the public. We have an amendment to our superintendent contract. Portion of, as with all employees, is a negotiated raise, which is 3%. And I saw erroneous information mentioning that raise was 5.3 and pointing to an adjustment we're making in that contract as the difference. And I want to make it very clear that there is only a 3% raise, and the adjustment to the contract has no dollar value attached to it. So just to make that clear. Any other questions or comments? Is there a motion to approve business items 1 through 12?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor? So moved. Moving on, placement under services for CSE and CPSE. Are there any questions or comments? Is there a motion to approve our placements services for CSE and CPSE? Is there a second? Second. All in favor? Moving on to personnel, we're going to vote this as a consent agenda. Are there any questions or comments regarding our appointments, amendments, retirements, resignations, or our leaves of absence? Thank you. Thank you. Is there a motion to approve personnel items A, B, C, D, and E?
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor? Okay. moving on to our minutes from last meeting. Any questions or comments? Is there a motion to approve our minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Next, we're coming up on policies. These are first reads. I guess these are a grouping that all sort of reference our ability to conduct video conferencing that meets, other various interlaced policies. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, the committee, and thank you to Melissa D. for doing this short cover memo, very much to the point, which does say, Alex, what you just said, that policy number 2325, which you've discussed at good length and has been modified accordingly, as is listed here in the cover memo. That's the first read now, given it had been modified, it deserved to be a first read again. But you now have attached to it 3 related policies. Policy committee worked at length on all of this. They come as a package deal, if you will, because if you do vote at your second read to adopt 2325, and you do have a public hearing on that at the start of the next meeting, so after that, assuming the public hearing doesn't change your vote, you would vote, and with it you'd be voting through 2310, 2340, 2360 in the ways noted to align with the revised 2325, if that's helpful.
Yeah, okay, so basically, the top headline here is that the board will allow board members to have three virtual meetings and act in their full capacity as board members, participating, voting 3 times a year, and then this related policies that are sort of the infrastructure behind that. And we're voting on all of it as once. Okay. Are there any, that's first read.
Yeah, so if there are questions, comments, your committee worked very hard, but see if there are questions or comments from you.
My only question, so I'm just trying to remember this, and I can't remember. So if you're in a public place, you can do multiple meetings, right?
So
This
far
is
as
a
it's
private
correct.
place, right?
Right.
And so, can we vote though, if we're in a public place on the phone?
Yes, because it doesn't nullify the previous.
We can,
Yeah, it doesn't nullify the previous stand.
so it's noticed, you can vote on the phone. I guess the question is,
I don't know if it makes a difference, but we always talked about video conferencing, never phone.
well, so it used to be phone.
Yeah, no, I know, so I
But it
can't
never
say
came
that
up a
phone.
vote, that's why I can't remember
Yeah,
that.
so I don't know if phone counts in this,
Well, that's my point, because,
we only ever talked about video conferencing.
just because I've been through so many different things, you go, well, this will never come up, and well, no, that came up. And what I'm trying to think is, if a vote comes up where it's tight and you're relying on someone to be a vote on a topic, and the technology isn't working that day, you can end up in a really tricky spot.
Correct.
And so that's why I'm wondering, can a phone be a proxy? And if it can't, it has to be a video monitor, and we can't get the video working, does that become an issue?
Of course. So, I
That's
mean,
substantive.
Melissa may have to check for the phone part. We did not discuss that at the policy meeting in terms of phone, but so far as I'm concerned, whatever used to be happening before COVID happened is still in effect, which is video conferencing. You can video conference so far as it's public, and you give the location for it to be announced publicly that this is going to happen, and there is quorum at one place.
So
You can
before
vote.
COVID, there was no video conference.
There is video conferencing allowed in policies across board.
I'm just
So
saying,
this
we
one-
never did it,
yeah,
we never
we-
had that capability.
Well, but that is something that is allowed
Okay.
across other, so that policy is not being tampered with. The new policy that we are adopting, which does not nullify, because we did ask the lawyers, we called them and we
Yeah,
did,
Doug,
is a new extraneous condition, which is what we are trying to adopt, which is where you can do it privately and still vote, and we have to give a specific number from what we want to do. So that specific number we discussed twice, which is 3, no extensions. You can participate from wherever you are, but not vote if you exceed that 3 within the year. So That's
the
the
only
new
thing I'm-
part.
The only thing, and I'm okay with that, the three, all that, I just wanna make sure the voting part, if you get to it, is not, you saw something, Bill, you were trying
Yeah,
to point out?
yeah, thanks. It's delineated here, and again, we never number these pages, which I find frustrating. Sorry, I'm gonna keep saying it. So somewhere, it's,
Third page.
yeah, thank you.
And which one?
This is policy.
And it's the
2325.
governing, it's the major policy, 2325. If you go down in it, and I read this as that board members who attend a public meeting by video conferencing will abide by the following guidelines, which mean, and number 3 is your technology works. Well, 1, be on time. 2, keep your camera on at all times, so camera. 3, ensure your technology works correctly. And so my implication as you go down this list is, if you're not abiding by this, you're not eligible to be participating, which we can double check with
But I
legal.
also wanna make sure that our technology is working in this room, that's the other, that's the other.
I mean,
True.
it's
Why is that?
worked. Alex did video conferencing. Jeremy did this one, which didn't work, but with Patrick doing the video conference, it has
Okay.
worked. When I checked the YouTube video, I was too loud. Like, it was too very clear and too loud. And it's overly worked. So the working part, I don't think, is the issue as much as
Okay. As long
the
as everyone
restrictions,
feels
you know.
comfortable with it, that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on these policies? I just want to thank the policy committee. Looks like a heavy lift here. There's a lot of stuff. All right.
No, it's
No,
first
no,
read.
just first read. So, we're open for second public comment. There is no public, so we're going to move on to agenda review for next time. So you said that we'll now schedule a public hearing for the video conferencing at the head of the next meeting, or is that?
It is scheduled, so on
Oh,
the
okay.
6th, you have, at 6:15, you have an executive session on purposes of security. And just to assure the public, that's a standard meeting that you as a board have embraced as a concept, so you, as you're allowed by state law to privately hear about our approaches to security. Alteris, Chief will be with us, Maureen, myself, Melissa will be in that session. But then at 7:15 promptly, there's a public hearing on the video conferencing policy, and then you would flow into your meeting. And the main big item for your meeting, we're trying to focus you on big items to help you out, is the Portrait of a Hastings Learner presentation.
Thank you, Dr. McPherson.
And the last thing, and you can get back to your officers, if this design we're now using, where you tend to get written reports from the administrators as opposed to the verbal, we'll stay with that because we feel we get the necessary time on the featured topic, if you will.
Thank you, Dr. McPherson. Board of Education comments.
I have a comment, but can I get, so are we going to have public comments to start every agenda, or?
Oh, you mean like we did today?
Yes. I don't know if
We just did it today.
we just did it today, okay. So, so because I'm part of the policy committee, and again, I am fully aware that the board, the collective board, as much as we are not council members, therefore we are not representatives in that sense, and we are sort of abiding by the jurisdiction that is placed on us by the state to service a public institution. Hastings is not a private school, it's a public school, so that we have to abide by some guidance that allows us to operate. And if there's anything I'm saying here that is not accurate, my colleagues and the administrators can correct that. So that being said, sometimes I'm fully aware that we, the collective seven, are residents of the community, part of the community as individuals. And therefore, we also take the pulse of the community. We understand certain frustrations that they share, that, again, it's not just as simple as we may think. But I personally want to give this comment to let the community know that I personally am not numb to that pulse, because I know that at the end of the day, we are the eyes and ears and maybe the voice as well of a public institution that is serving the community here. So to that regard, I know that there has been some questions about board comment, and my initial, last year when I came here, I did made a public comment. I know somehow someone referred to it about the equitable voices being in the room, especially for those that cannot make it because they have to work 7 jobs a day. So I want to share that process of thinking that went into it. I came with the assumption that we can just have emails, and it was a public conversation we had here. We talked about it, and my colleagues and I, at that time in the policy committee, and Doreen was part of it, did our due diligence to see how we can bring that equitable voice into the room. But I want us to all let's just be solution oriented and stop the dichotomy of debates. Let's think through this together. If we have a clerk here reading emails upon emails that just get streamed in during our board meetings, this is not a meeting that we yay and nay away. If you look at the laws that govern our meetings, we are supposed to work. It's where I personally don't come here with a determined mindset. It's here that I make my decision because it has to be about consensus building. So that is the expectation that is given to us to do. We don't come here, we are not supposed to sidebars and come here with decisions and present. We have to work through the actionable goals here, right here. So I get the frustration that yes, not everyone can come in here because yes, we know we've had empty spaces, but if you follow what we, the collective board, what we do, any email that we receive somehow, we bring that information to bear in our conversations. So please just know that we are all in this together. And if you think your voice hasn't been heard enough, just email again, and somehow, and we see the responses. So this is not a fight. I assure you, as much as we are different, we all want the same end result. It may not be my path. It may be a suggestion that somebody else brings, but it will end up being the same end results that we are all seeking. So we don't have to be stuck in our ways thinking it has to be my way, it has to be your way, it has to be your way, and stuff like that. And so we are all trying to figure all of this out together. The more we get input, the more we increase our funds of knowledge in deliberating what we need to do, the better. But please don't let us come at it with that divisiveness. That's the word I'm looking for. So I'm hoping that at least it makes sense that the community members may not be able to wait for too long. So yes, bring in public comment at the beginning. I think it makes sense. And we make it twice. So I would suggest to my colleagues that it becomes a standing order that at least one of the public comments should come first, so that people that want to come in and go can come in, say what they need to say, and then leave. And that way we can even use that information to shape our discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lynn. Any other board comments?
I just want to make one comment on top of Dr. Lang's comment, which is that regarding emailing, having the board read emails, if I remember correctly, the legal rule, it's that there's really no way to authenticate the email. So I could create an email that says that I'm, drlang@gmail.com, read something that I say is like, the school's doing really poorly, I hate it, Dr. Lang. There's no way to prove that you did it. So that is the point of having public come in person, declare who they are and where they live. Because otherwise, I'm not saying that people would do it, but for legal reasons, you cannot have somebody, because somebody could pretend to be somebody else. And we can't have that the main reason. It's not to prevent the public from talking, it's to make sure that the actual public is talking.
Thank you, Doreen.
I'd like to thank the administration. The district highlights, you know, we had a long meeting and we put them into the record. Just one thing that I definitely read in there, and I think a lot of us knew, the middle school 7th and 8th grade play this weekend. I heard it was fabulous, and thanks to the students and the residents who helped put it on, and of course with our faculty, teachers, and staff. That's always a nice part of our whole learner program, is the way we support our drama department and our students that grow through that. So it was obviously in our district highlights. I just wanted to throw it out there for our thousands of viewers.
For posterity.
Go 7th, 8th grade.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you. Any other board comments? No? Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Good. Is there a second? All right. All in favor? All right. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.